Welcome to LSB Feaster's Radio Aircheck and Classic TV channel.
Our telephone number in Boston is 254-5678 if you'd like to talk to Father McLaughlin. We'll give you some background and some information about him here at the outset. And if you'd like to, again, call from out of state, our area code is 617. Our telephone number is 254-5678. We ask that if you've called before on other occasions to give somebody else an opportunity to speak. We'd like also for you to step aside if you've called in the last few weeks or the last month or so to let people who haven't had the opportunity to speak and to ask questions and to talk to Father McLaughlin during the course of the night. Again, our phone number is 254-5678 here on WBZ Radio, the Spirit of 103. I have a few messages to get to, and then we'll introduce Father McLaughlin to you.
Take a second now, look up in the sky. Can't you see the blue there? That's an eastern plane flying through the sky. Shouldn't that be you there?
You gotta believe it's for you. You gotta believe things come true. You gotta believe and look it up now. Eastern's looking up now. Look at us, look at you. And you gotta believe you can fly. You can go where you want to go fly. Do what you want to do, fly. Be what you want to be. Fly Eastern. You gotta believe.
Eastern believes saving you time is good business. That's why Eastern has 3 nonstops to Tampa, St. Petersburg, and 1 nonstop to nearby Orlando. For reservations, call your travel agent or Eastern, the Wings of Man.
When it comes to news, some folks get it and some folks don't. Get it every morning with Gary LaPierre on BZ.
Devereaux, you're up on that horse with a noose around your cheating neck. 'Cause you sold me an electric captain rodeo toy that don't go.
Hold your horses. You got to put batteries in them, you klutz.
Devereaux, you want to start something?
Yeah.
If you want to start something, get the battery that can last more than twice as long as ordinary batteries. C and D size Rayovac heavy-duty supercells. The buyer's guide on the label tells you where to use them and how much extra life you can get in radios, cassettes, flashlights, and toys. So to keep things going longer than with ordinary batteries, get the one with a long life formula. Rayovac heavy-duty supercell.
Devereaux, you want to start something?
Yes, your Captain Rodeo toy. Here, you slip this noose on while I slip these Rayovac supercells into him.
Oh, my stars, look at him go. And look at his little horse go. Yap, horse.
I forgot to take my noose back.
Devereaux, you're hard to like.
Rayovac supercells, another powerful idea from ESB Incorporated.
Day by day,
Godspell.
day by day,
Godspell comes home.
Lord, things I pray.
Godspell, the world's most popular musical, returns to the stage of the Wilbur Theater. Godspell opens March 11th for 4 weeks only. Seats are on sale now for Godspell. Don't miss it.
Now, it's 10 minutes past 8, and we're going to speak to Dr. McLaughlin, as Father McLaughlin prefers being called. Am I right about that, Father?
Yes, when I'm dressed the way I am, when I'm not administering the sacraments, I prefer the doctor.
Yeah, all right. Just to give you some further background, Dr. McLaughlin is deputy... do you pronounce it in Rhode Island McLaughlin or McLaughlin?
I say McLaughlin, but I have many dear friends whom I respect deeply who say McLaughlin.
In Boston, I think that's what it is. If you're a New Yorker, if you come from New York, that name is McLaughlin, and you can't cut it in any other manner or fashion. If you're from Boston, it's McLaughlin, and that's it.
Well, I used to say McLaughlin, and I studied with the Jesuits, and I had a very dear Jesuit professor by the name of Father Bill Murphy, who was former president of Boston College, and he corrected me one time in the junior rate up at Shadowbrook in Lenox, Massachusetts, and he said, "Your name is not pronounced McLaughlin, it's McLaughlin." So his word in those days was law, and I obeyed him sedulously.
Well, regardless, you know that it's either McLaughlin or McLaughlin, your preference, actually. He is Deputy Special Assistant to the President. He has worked for the President for over 2.5 years, now serves Mr. Nixon as an advisor, fact finder, and presidential spokesman. In 1971, when he was first hired, Father McLaughlin, Dr. McLaughlin, served the president as a speechwriter. He holds a Ph.D. from Columbia, 2 M.A. degrees from Boston College in English and philosophy. He did advanced study at Stanford University in California, and as an ordained and active Jesuit priest, he holds degrees in theology. He's lectured, of course, throughout the world. He's a former associate editor of the weekly journal of opinion, America. And while with that magazine, he wrote on a variety of domestic and international socio-political subjects. And in 1969, he received the Catholic Press Association Award for Excellence in Journalism. It was during the Biafran-Nigerian War that Dr. McLaughlin produced a color documentary for ABC television, photographing war conditions, refugee camps, sick bays, hospitals, children's homes, bombing and strafing damage. In 1970, Father McLaughlin, Dr. McLaughlin, sought the United States Senate seat from Rhode Island as the endorsed Republican candidate. And in 1972, from mid-May to mid-June, he toured South Vietnam, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia to examine under White House assignment refugee situations and other aspects of the war. Dr. McLaughlin has just returned from a similar fact-finding and lecturing journey, which this year brought him to Lebanon, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, South Vietnam, Indonesia, and Australia. And, of course, he's been on many television programs, The Today Show, the CBS Evening News, The Dick Cavett Show, the ABC Evening News, Panorama Metro Media, the Cup Show in Chicago, the Mike Douglas Show, the Lou Gordon Show, many other regional television and radio programs. He was here a couple of years back discussing Vietnam with us on a very interesting night, and he's here tonight. Maybe you can tell us the difference between the civilian suit, and I'm sure people are confused about the fact that you're a Jesuit, a Catholic priest, and sometimes you wear the clerical garb and sometimes you do not.
I wear secular clothes, Jerry, to emphasize that I am not serving in any formal sense as a member of the Catholic priesthood, or indeed even as, in a formal sense, as a member of the Society of Jesus within the White House. I do not administer the sacraments within the White House.
How would that differ from Congressman Dryden?
Well, that's a question you'd have to ask him. I wear the separate dress because I feel that I want to avoid any errors of impression. I don't want people to conclude that I'm trading off the collar. Mm-hmm. And I find that it works well in my life, but I certainly would not want to dictate to anyone else who might be in a position similar to mine what he should do.
Well, I mean, is there a difference? He's also a Jesuit, former dean of the Boston College Law School. Is there a difference in a personal way of handling it? That's the only thing I'm trying to find out. Could he dress in civilian clothes if he wanted to?
Yes,
if he personally wanted to? Would he have to get permission from the church or from the archbishop or something like that?
He could dress in civilian attire with ease. There may be other differences too. I try to make my lines totally parallel so that errors of impression can be avoided. I pay an income tax. As a matter of fact, I pay all taxes as an ordinary civilian, and that might be a point of difference too. But for all practical purposes, I am autonomous, and you can see the necessity of my maintaining that autonomy in this particular role that I play. I've been with the president for almost 3 years, and I have structured my life on a multiple hat theory. I wear 2 hats, but the 2 hats are never worn at the same time.
Then how does that reckon with the idea of the beliefs that must go along with the fact that you are a clergyman, that you are a Catholic priest, and you still get money, and you still what about the vow of poverty and things like that? I'd like to get that out of the way because I would hate to get hung up on that during the course of the night when some Catholics are going to be calling in, probably all Catholics calling in, saying, why aren't you, why are you doing it differently than is Father Dryden? That's what I'm trying to get straight in my mind. You do get a salary, though.
I do get a salary, yeah. And I have full determination as to how that salary is to be spent. And that, again, is to enforce the independence of my state. You see, if I am to serve the president, and that's what I do, with complete freedom, then I have to be independent. Mm-hmm. One could conceivably ask, if one were not independent, what decisions are being made by other people than you, or what influence is being brought to bear on you. And therefore, I find that it's safer all around to conduct my personal life as I do.
All right. Now, that's out of the way. But you do receive a salary from the United States government?
Yes, I do.
As a speechwriter and aide to the President of the United States?
I do relatively little speech writing now. I was hired originally as a speechwriter, but my duties since the time of my hiring have expanded. Essentially what I do is I report to the President on impressions that I gather from the electorate in various parts of the country. Primarily, however, what I do is I record for him what I construe to be the political implications of programs and policies that he might undertake. I also serve as a presidential spokesman. There are many invitations that he receives which he cannot take, and I, among others, notably Ann Armstrong and Stanley Scott on the White House staff, we fill in as our schedule permits.
Do you feel there's no conflict between your moral obligations to the church and your obligations to the president?
No, I feel, as a matter of fact, that in my own instance, that my political life is a support to my ministerial life, my priesthood, and vice versa. I find that I'm a better priest by being a politician. I wish that many of the priests who are within the range of my voice, or priests generally, could enjoy the insights that develop from dealing with people at very close range on controversial issues of public importance. Probably the most rewarding experience that I've ever had was running for public office, campaigning in that 1970 race that you alluded to, where you go into the actual conditions in which people work. I don't want to be unduly critical, but I do feel that many of our clergy of all faiths are excessively insulated from the real concerns, the real hungers, the aspirations, and the conditions under which people live. And it's really quite not only pointless, but it's dangerous to legislate on moral questions or doctrinal questions or pastoral questions if you're not familiar with the driving concerns of people, with their needs, the underpinnings of their lives at the grassroots level.
I just begin to think that if you're a Catholic and you're a priest to boot and you're dealing with politics, and the Catholic Church position on various issues is rather doctrinaire. That dealing with the pragmatic aspects of American politics might not be compatible.
I can think of no issue that puts me in a position of conflict. As a matter of fact, most of the 99.9% of the issues with which a political figure is faced today have little, if any, denominational significance as such. It is true that the churches, Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish churches, have offices of legislative liaison, and they do take positions on various pieces of legislation. They do conduct lobbying efforts within limits. There is a 5% substantiality rule. That is, not more than 5% of their budget can be expended in lobbying efforts. But there are relatively few bills in which the church, as a church, takes a position. In those bills in which the church does take a position, I find myself to be thinking harmoniously with the church, but for reasons that are not denominational. And I could illustrate that for you in the matter of the proposed constitutional amendment on human life, which is going to be reviewed in the Senate chambers this coming Wednesday and Thursday. I take the position that the Supreme Court ruling, while it is the law of the land, that it should be repealed. And I take that position not on denominational or religious grounds at all. I take that position because I see the first function of the state, of the government, to protect human life wherever human life is found. And nothing scientific has led me to conclude that the human fetus is not a human being in development. I have seen no microbiological evidence or endocrinological evidence or genetic evidence, which leads me to conclude that this being ought not to be protected by the state and allowed full constitutional rights. And I might add that in principle, the President feels this way too, and he is giving a great deal of study to the idea of an amendment and we may be hearing more about this within the next several days. Now, you understand my point. My point is, while the Church, as a denomination, the Catholic Church, takes a strong position on abortion, I take the position not for the reasons that are alleged by the Church. I do not discount them, but they do not figure in my thinking when I take an anti-abortion position. What is the obligation of the state to protect life. As the charter documents of this country have said, the first function of the state is to protect life, then liberty, then the pursuit of happiness. Now, my opponent in this matter is another Jesuit priest who is legally a pro-abortionist. His name is Congressman Robert Brennan. He takes the position of favoring abortion legally, although he has, I think, waffled rather ludicrously on this subject. He nevertheless takes that position, and here you might want to address your question to him, but the overall point in both of our positions, I think, is that our denominational, doctrinal beliefs have not influenced our thinking
That's a very specific moral question. Now, there's another specific moral question which everybody is involved in today, and I think that Watergate really is a moral question for the American people. And one wonders how you can be involved in the inner workings of how the strategy is going to be employed against various enemies of the president, be they the press, or be they the House Judiciary Committee, or be they the special prosecutor, or anybody who at this point is digging to get information about the president that either would lead to his impeachment or his resignation. How can one take a position when those arguments are in effect quite moral? I find my mail regarding Watergate all deals with ethics and integrity and morality and that sort of thing, so that if you have to be dealing with a strategy, which sometimes in all political battles between states, between nations, between groups, between parties, becomes a bit pragmatic, to say the least, how can one do that if one is, a priest?
Well, I've taken the position, as the president has, that individuals should be held fully accountable, morally and legally, for their acts. And if they have been guilty of wrongdoing, they should be punished. But besides being a moral matter, the Watergate is also a political matter. And to my way of thinking, it's been heavily politicized. In the matter of impeachment, for example, you are aware, I'm sure, that all 37 congressmen who filed resolutions calling for the impeachment of the president are all left Democrats, with one exception, Pete McCluskey. And all 37 were strenuous supporters of George McGovern in 1972. In other words, no one has filed an impeachment resolution in the House of Representatives who was not energetically supportive of George McGovern. One might be led to the conclusion that these people are consistent. They didn't want Richard Nixon to be elected president in '72. They don't want him to be president today.
But you would want them to reflect their constituencies too, wouldn't you?
On this particular
if they
matter,
are so-called left Democrats, whatever that's supposed to imply,
that
then
means
you surely would want them to measure their constituencies and say, well, this is this is what I'm getting from my district, and this is what I truly believe should be done. Now, if they happen to be supporters of McGovern,
I'm not sure that you can really, here we're moving aside from the central point of the politicization of the impeachment question, but I'm not sure that you can reach a true judgment on the guilt or innocence of Richard Nixon in terms of a statistical head count of your constituents. In point of fact, however, you know that a consensus of this country does not want the president to be impeached. That means about 2/3. And likewise, do not want him to resign.
I don't think that congressmen or government leaders should necessarily always reflect their constituencies, although we have poll-taking by the president, poll-taking by candidates, poll-taking by congressmen, poll-taking by senators, all these people trying to sniff out what the public is thinking about. I'm not, if that probably one of the reasons I personally could never be a politician, because I could never always reflect the so-called majority view in my district, and I wouldn't want to be worrying about who's around the corner going to take me on in the next year for re-election. All I'm saying is that maybe those congressmen were reflecting their constituents on this very touchy and emotional, highly politicized issue.
Well, you say that because you feel very strongly about certain issues. You come down very hard on one side or the other of certain issues, like, say, busing or amnesty. Well, I would advance this proposition to you, Jerry, from where I sit, from my limited experience in government, in politics, that today that there is not a controversial issue of major public importance on which you cannot, as a good Jew, a good Christian, a man with a sensitive moral conscience, whether he has any religious affiliation or not, that you cannot, with a good conscience, take a position on either side and not be in conflict with that good conscience. And what this reduces to is the complexity of human truth, that there is morality on both sides of these questions. I have people coming in to see me to talk about an issue like, let us say, amnesty, with intense subjective conviction on both sides of the question. So, and also objectively, I would say that all of these issues have enough morality on either side of them to justify a position on either side.
Well, I mean, this all began by your saying that it's become impeachment is a political issue, and I think that many people have written that of all of the people who have the Congress has been very wishy-washy about the issue. There have been a couple of people, Father Drine and Congressman Abzug and others who are known not to like the president, who filed resolutions, but generally speaking, the Congress is not a very bold body. And I think perhaps what we're hearing tonight from you, Dr. McLaughlin, is the next strategy to be employed by the White House, that there are, and I heard that on the news tonight, as a matter of fact, and I was not surprised to hear you say it, that they're going to go after the congressmen who have already made their position clear on impeachment and get them to not take a position or have them ruled out of order, legally speaking, so they will not be able to vote on the question of impeachment.
Well, that's I have called for the disqualification of one member of the Judiciary Committee. That's Congressman Dryden, and I base my call for his disqualification on the apparent fact that he has already judged Richard Nixon in his head and in his heart as guilty. He has, for example, said that Richard Nixon will be out by spring. He has said Richard Nixon is the absolute hypocrite. He has said Richard Nixon was guilty of Hitlerite genocide in Southeast Asia. Congressman Dryden wore an impeach Nixon button on his lapel until recently, when I am told he was instructed to take it off. He was also, as you know, a rabid, almost, shall I say, frenetic supporter of George McGovern here in Massachusetts. You put all this together, and I think that any fair observer would have to say that there is not a jury in the country that would permit Robert Dryden to sit on evidence relating to the guilt or innocence of Richard Nixon. Now, he says in response to this that just as he would feel, he also, I might add, filed the resolution on July the 31st calling for the president's impeachment, which was the first resolution to have been so filed. So he has publicly, intensely, and formally voiced his,
what I'm saying
his hatred. I think that's a fair word. I think it's fair to say that he abhors what Richard Nixon stands for. Now, he responds to that by saying, just as he would feel free to institute or to file a resolution dealing with consumers' rights and then vote on it afterwards, so too he can file a resolution calling for the impeachment of the president and vote on that afterwards too. And to that I would say that if he cannot distinguish between filing a resolution or a bill on consumers' rights and voting on that, which is essentially a legislative act, and filing a resolution on impeachment and voting on that, which is essentially a judicial process, then that very failure on his part to distinguish between those two processes is the most formidable and persuasive reason why he should disqualify himself.
We'll be back in a moment. Dr. John McLaughlin is with us. He's a Jesuit priest, as you know, Deputy Special Assistant to the President of the United States. We're here on the Spirit of New England, WBZ Boston, Group W Westinghouse Broadcasting. If you'd like to call later, we'll be happy to take your calls and comments at 254-5678.
Stanley picked me up last night. The food was a delight, and I loved the way he held me when we danced. But as he drove me home, his muffler coughed and groaned, and I lost my inclination for romance.
Better get to Midas, better get to Midas. Take your car to Midas and get your muffler fixed.
I've played the cello many years with perfect pitch in both my ears until the maestro drove me home that fateful day. His muffler made a sound that was heard for miles around. Now I can't tell a C-sharp from an A, hey, hey.
Better get to Midas, better get to Midas. Take your car to Midas and get your muffler fixed by the guys who are specialists.
At Midas, we carry mufflers for over 1,700 different car models. We're specialists. We have to do a better job.
The Cambridge Crafts Center offers adult education courses in just about everything. This is BZ's Larry Justice, suggesting you call PolyArts at 492-2900 for all the details.
It's a great night, Lenny. The open sky, the stars, this warm boxcar. What are we having for dinner?
You'll love it, Max. Real class. We got chicken soup El Bourguignon, string beans Francoise, and hot dog stroganoff made with Pennsylvania Dutch egg noodles.
But Lenny, they're the rich egg noodles. You shouldn't have spent all that money.
Max, Pennsylvania Dutch egg noodles aren't expensive. They just call them rich because they're so rich and golden. You know, they make them just with egg yolks, no whites, and a special blend of enriched durum flour. That's why Pennsylvania Dutch egg noodles taste so rich. You know, Max, Pennsylvania Dutch egg noodles will even make our economy meals taste like a million.
Lenny, this is the Ritz.
Pennsylvania Dutch also makes a great-tasting egg noodles and sauce side dish, Egg Noodles Plus. Tender golden egg noodles plus a mouth-watering cheese, chicken, butter, or beef sauce, complete in one envelope. Egg Noodles Plus cooks up in one pot with no draining in just 7 minutes. Serve your family a delicious new side dish, Egg Noodles Plus. It's a real plus at lunch or dinner.
Schaefer is the one beer to have when you're having more than one. Schaefer pleasure doesn't fade even when your thirst is done. The most rewarding flavor in this man's world for people who are having fun. Schaefer is the one beer to have when you're having more than one.
Ever wonder what makes Schaefer the one beer to have when you're having more than one? One reason is more than one fermentation. Most brewers just ferment their beer once, but Schaefer is fermented twice. Once to make it beer, and twice to make it Schaefer. The one beer with flavor so fine, it keeps shining through, glass after frosty glass. More than one fermentation is one reason, but of course there's more than one reason behind the one beer to have when you're having more than one.
TWA still has plenty of flights to 55 cities in the USA and around the world. For long flights, there's still no other airline with all the comforts of TWA's ambassador service. At most airports, baggage X-rays speed you through security. In coach, you still get a choice of meals, and for a small charge, a choice of movies on all international flights. For some airlines, it's a tough year, but TWA is not cutting any of the comforts or convenience you expect from them. TWA is still TWA. Fly TWA to Los Angeles, San Francisco, London, and Paris. Now it's 8:35 on WBZ. Let's return now to Dr. John McLaughlin, Deputy Special Assistant to the President of the United States, with the President for close to 3 years, serving as an advisor, fact finder, and presidential spokesman. And he's here with us tonight discussing, among other issues, the situation, Watergate, impeachment, etc. Now, let's get back to what we were just discussing, the business of what the next strategy seems to be, because it's hard, quite frankly, to keep up with all the strategies from Operation Candor through now what obviously it looks like another strategy to disqualify. That's the word I was looking for. Certain members of Congress from impeachment, so there cannot be a majority. And again, if I were the President of the United States and I had decided that I was going to stay in that office come, if you'll excuse the expression, hell or high water, I would map this strategy out, step by step by step, plan by plan, and evidently that seems to be the new strategy. Is that true?
Well, I don't know of any strategy beyond trying to respond intelligently to the Rodino Committee. The Rodino Committee has not yet determined what an impeachable offense is, yet they've asked for data. So they've, without having charged the president with an offense, they want evidence. Now, this must be the first case in human history where a charge has not been made, a crime has not been proven, and yet evidence is being solicited on an unmade charge, an undefined charge, and evidence is being sought on a crime which doesn't exist. The most, to my way of thinking, it would be comic were it not such a miscarriage of justice. The worst back alley mugger has the right to know his accuser. He has the right to know what he is being charged with, and he has a right to know the relevance of the evidence being sought from him. And yet the President of the United States is being denied all of these rights.
In what way?
Well, there is no impeachable offense been defined yet.
Well, the Congress has come up, the committee has come up with some sort of a recommendation as to the what an impeachable offense may be.
That is incorrect. The staff has filed
recommendation. I said,
the staff has filed a report, but it's been made abundantly clear that this report is simply a registering of the opinion
what do you think they ought to do?
Of staff members.
What
but
do you
the
think
Rodino Committee, the 21 Democrats and the 17 Republicans, the 38 members of the committee, including the chairman himself, none of them have stated on behalf of the committee what is an impeachable offense. Now, the White House has held, the president believes, and I believe, that an impeachable offense, by the language and the concept of the Constitution, must contain that which is criminal. It must be an indictable offense. It must be a violation of the penal code, and I would add that Pete McCluskey feels this way, as I learned on a television program with him out in San Francisco about 3 weeks ago. Even Mr. Dobrevier, who put together the volume that reportedly, that is in the press, is being used as the catechism of the Rodino Committee, even Mr. Dobrevier supports the view that criminality must be involved in the charge. Now, the Rodino Committee hasn't clarified this. There have been all kinds of hints, but meanwhile they are soliciting information, and so we find ourselves, I think, in an intolerable juridical situation.
This is a small newspaper. I didn't want to whip out the New York Times or the Washington Post because then one could claim prejudice. This is the Warren Times Observer from Warren, Pennsylvania, and it deals with the question of impeachable offenses. And this is on February 27th, 1974. The headline in the editorial is President Nixon's assertion just plain baloney. President Nixon asserted Monday night that some anonymous White House lawyers had advised him that a criminal offense is required as grounds for the impeachment of a president, and that's baloney. It's not debatable. It's not even a possible legal position. It's plain baloney, hokum, nonsense. A lawyer himself, Nixon, must know better. If he doesn't, he's naive, and though he has been accused of many things, nobody yet has offered convincing proof that Nixon is anything but shrewd, and if he does know better, but made the statement despite his knowing better, then he's either a liar or a very frightened man. Consider, if the president exercising his constitutional power to pardon convicted criminals freed, say, Sirhan, and made that murderer of Senator Robert Kennedy a top-level White House advisor with de facto jurisdiction over, for example, the FBI, he would have done nothing in violation of existing criminal law. But if he were even to suggest such a ridiculous course of action, Nixon or any other president would face such a storm of public censure that impeachment proceedings, speedily though they might begin, would be anticlimactic. Several presidents, including Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, Andrew Jackson in a dispute with the Supreme Court, and Franklin Roosevelt during World War II, have taken actions that were patently illegal. Some have even admitted the illegality of their actions. Old Hickory Jackson was proud of the illegality of his refusal to enforce a high court decision, and they were not impeached. Why not? Because impeachment is a constitutional device concerned not with personal punishment of an individual offender, but rather concerned with maintaining the continuity of government. In fact, beyond removal from office, the Constitution does not specify any punishment for an impeached and convicted president. Were such punishment to be sought, a separate court trial would be needed. Impeachment, in other words, is a process completely separate from the U.S. criminal codes. That's why among the grounds needed, the Constitution lists other high crimes and misdemeanors. Taken in its purely legalistic sense, a misdemeanor on the order of a traffic ticket cannot remotely be construed as grounds for impeachment. But taken in its broad sense, the word obviously covers a wide range of acts or failures to act. In fact, it seems obvious that the Founding Fathers, notoriously conservative and restrictive in spelling out most government powers in the Constitution, deliberately let the wording stand in the broad sense in order to cover contingencies they might not have thought of then, but feared should occur in the future. In short, a president concludes, a president can be impeached by the House for just about anything the House deems is an impeachable offense. The complex nature of the proceeding itself is a safeguard against frivolous use of the House's power, and the House must obtain a hard-to-get two-thirds Senate vote for conviction. That complexity, not the criminal statute doctrine he's trying to hide behind, is the safeguard Mr. Nixon has in this matter. And he or his anonymous lawyers are just plain dead wrong if they insult our intelligence further by claiming otherwise. Let's end Watergate, all right, Mr. Nixon, but let's end it not in the obfuscations, word games, and stupid statements now emanating from your camp, but rather in the full light of a thorough, open inquiry.
Well, in response to that,
right.
I would like to read to you a somewhat shorter piece by William S. White, which is also the editorial position, I would dare say, of the majority of American newspapers right now. White says this: if the House Judiciary Committee, now considering a possible attempt to impeach President Nixon, is to adopt the theories of its staff as to what constitutes an impeachable offense, that committee will begin its somber task as a kangaroo court. The Constitution says plainly that a president may be impeached, indicted by the House, and convicted, ousted from office by the Senate, only for, quote, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, close quotes. The conclusion reached by the partisan employees of a partisan committee led by an urban liberal Democratic politician from New Jersey, Representative Peter Rodino, whom I might interject here, received $30,000 from American Labor in his last 1972 bid, which election he won by 80% of the vote, which raises the question of why he needed all that money. Representative Peter Rodino takes what is now called, quote, a broad view, close quotes. This is broad indeed. It is that a president need commit no crime of any kind, as the word crime is defined in the English language, to find himself in the dock and his life and career in ruins. He need only do something vaguely called abusing his powers, and this could be anything from bombing military targets or taking other military actions which Congress had not approved to impounding money that Congress had appropriated. Under this standard, there is hardly a competent president in the history of the United States who could not have been impeached once, twice, or in some cases half a dozen times. Jefferson clearly could have been impeached for making the Louisiana Purchase. Woodrow Wilson could have been impeached for the desperate offense of arming American ships against the Kaiser's U-boats before we were formally at war. Franklin Roosevelt could have been impeached over and over for trying to pack the Supreme Court, for attempting to help save Britain before we had entered the Second World War, and so on. Harry Truman could have been impeached, so to speak, almost on alternate weeks, so many and so vast were his transgressions as measured by Rodino's staff study. John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson would have been in about the same situation. Dwight Eisenhower could have got the heave-ho for daring to send Marines to Lebanon, and so on. The Judiciary Committee's staff tries to cover itself from the just charge of behaving with outrageous unfairness by pious disclaimers here and there. What it is really saying, however, is that abuse of power of undefined nature or neglect of presidential duty of unstated kinds would be enough to destroy an unpopular president. Who is to define what is an abuse? Some of the ultra-liberals in Congress define Vietnam War, which at one time the House unanimously endorsed and the Senate supported by a vote of 80-2, as an impeachable offense. Some have thought it impeachable for the president to refuse to spend money which in his judgment would be demonstrably wasted. Some have thought, in fact, that one of the high crimes of which the Constitution speaks is simply to disagree with him. I might add that one congressman, Patsy Mink, feels that the president should be impeached because he dismantled the OEO. Another congressman, Fortney Stark, and here I'm not quoting White, but Fortney Stark believes that the president should be impeached because he was over-emphatic in his defense of his friend Charles Rebozo. It may be that the House committee, I'm resuming the final paragraph of the white column. It may be that the House committee and even the House itself, full of fears in an election year, will adopt a code of impeachment of such monstrous nonsense, though I doubt it. Conceivably, even the Senate might marshal the necessary two-thirds majority to convict the President under such a code, though this I would bet 10 to 1 against. But should House and Senate so act, one thing would be sure. This country would never have another President with guts enough to run a peanut stand.
We're going to break again. Dr. John McLaughlin is here, Deputy Special Assistant to the President. This is Jerry Williams on the Spirit of New England, WBZ Radio. Able Rug has a giant rug sale going on right now. Gorgeous Raya rugs from $24.88, striking Oriental designs from $88.88, plus loads of shags, plushes, and broadlooms, all at half price now at Able Rug Cleaners, corner of Franklin and Cambridge Streets in Alston.
Get glasses that make you happy. We've got it all waiting for you. Put on a happy face at your vision center.
Here are some facts you ought to know if you wear or buy glasses. Pearl Vision Centers provides complete one-stop, one-hour service for most glasses. They have the greatest selection of frames and lenses you've ever seen, and they are the only people who offer you the great eyeglass guarantee. You break your glasses, we fix or replace them unconditionally for 1 whole year. Pearl Vision Center, close to Boston, in the Methuen Mall, Worcester Center, Hampshire Plaza in Manchester.
Glasses that make you happy. We've got it all waiting for you. Put on a happy face at your vision center.
Pearl Vision Center in the Methuen Mall is open weekdays 10 to 9, Saturdays till 5, and watch for their grand opening in downtown Boston.
Some time ago, David Hathaway stayed at Dunphy's Parker House and discovered the justifiably famous goodnight guarantee. Naturally, he was impressed. So when shortages and crises made living at home a luxury few men could afford, and vacations a luxury few even consider, David turned back to the Dunphys. He was not disappointed. For somehow, despite the soaring costs of everything, the Dunphy family still offers 3-night, 4-day weekend mini vacations for $24.95. Children stay free if they share your magnificent room. It seems like a lot, and it is, but there's more. You also get 3 complete breakfasts. You can stay at any of 13 Dunphy New England hotels. Stay at one night and another the next. It's a great escape for David Hathaway and others like him who are on the way up, down, or around New England. People have never needed a vacation more, and for $24.95 per person double occupancy, you can afford 1 or more. Just call Gail at the Parker House, Boston, 227-8788. You can hardly afford to stay home.
These are times like none we've known, and sometimes you feel alone.
Trying hard to stretch each dollar.
Squeezing nickels till they holler. And you need a bank to give a helping hand. Understand what you want when you want it.
Why not see one of the 10 Shawmut Association banks, like the Lexington Trust, from Lexington to Acton?
For the kind of life you lead, you want a bank that fills each need with a lot of strength behind it. Well, there's one place you can find it. With a Shawmut Association bank, you're set. You can get what you want when you want it. What you want when you want it. What you want.
10 minutes to 9 here on WBZ. Let's return to Dr. John McLaughlin, Deputy Special Assistant to the President. Do you get to see the President at all?
Yes, I do.
You do. Do you discuss these matters about the defense of President's position, at least, with him?
I discuss a full range of subjects, Jerry.
Because we don't get to talk to too many people who get to speak to the President on either an irregular or regular basis. I imagine this is sort of irregular, depending upon how often you get to Washington and how often things change and what positions have to be taken that are consistent with the White House position. What is the President thinking about all of these indictments that are being handed down?
Well, the President is, I'd say that he is psychologically and physically and emotionally and spiritually very much at peace. I think he's in first-rate condition. He seems to be growing more philosophic as time goes on. And I think it's the lucidity and the resoluteness of a man who knows that he is innocent.
Innocent of what?
innocent of the charges that are being brought against him, that he obstructed justice or whatever.
That's really incredible to believe.
Well, it may be to you, Jerry, but it is.
I'm not indicating that's more than just me. I represent probably some other people in our wide listening audience who feel very strongly about the president's not even criminal involvement, but maybe maladministration or and all those terms that lawyers use.
James Madison excluded maladministration as an impeachable offense, and if we ever throw the net that wide, then our presidents won't have the courage of a peanut bandit.
What is the president's responsibility with respect to all of these people who are either indicted,
well, this is
guilty,
this is
going to jail?
The heart of the case. What is the extent of his responsibility? He has stated quite flatly that he assumes responsibility for these problems, this situation. At the same time, though, American jurisprudence says that that a superior cannot be held accountable for the actions of his subordinates, criminally accountable, legally accountable, unless there is evidence of complicity. And I don't see a shred of valid evidence indicating that Richard Nixon was an accomplice.
All of those people are concerned about those 18-and-a-half-minute tape gaps, about the lack of the president's cooperation with various committees and
about the 18-and-a-half minutes, you are familiar, I'm sure, with the study that has been described in Science magazine, which has been no particular friend to President Nixon. But Science magazine has advanced the view of the Dector associates, Mr. Bell, that there is another explanation for that 18-and-a-half minutes, an explanation other than that which has been advanced by the quote-unquote experts, and namely that is the defective diode bridge, which remarkably and astonishingly enough, the so-called experts, and Mr. Bell maintains that they're not experts at all as far as the tape recorder is concerned, tape recording instruments are concerned, that they know relatively little about tape recorders, but that they chose, once they discovered that the UR5000 universal machine that had been used in the President's Secretary's office, when they found that that was defective, they proceeded to repair the machine so that now it's virtually impossible to replicate the condition under which the tapes were indeed erased so as to determine whether it was in fact caused by the defective parts of the machine.
Didn't they get a chance to tell that to the grand jury?
Did who get a chance?
Whoever was called before the grand jury after Judge Sirica gave that information to the grand jury.
Well, except for what leaks to us through the various committees, particularly the Irvin Committee, we don't know what happens in the grand jury. As you know, the grand jury hearings, proceedings
I'm saying, didn't the grand jury call some people from the White House staff to indicate the president's position on the 18-and-a-half-minute gap?
The White House is currently reviewing the possibility of this being the explanation.
What do you think?
My point here, Jerry, is I really don't think you're being fair to the evidence at hand when you allege that the 18-and-a-half minutes is an indication of any guilt on the president's part.
Well, I'm not saying there's guilt or innocence involved here. I'm merely indicating to you that the American people's concerns you're kind of pushing aside by saying, well, look, now I'm going to take aim at our targets. Our targets are the so-called experts who evidently were picked partly by the White House and partly by the court. I'm going to take aim at the people who have indicated their position about impeachment beforehand in the Congress, Congressman Dryden and others. We're going to the best defense is a good offense. Might be labeled as this particular tactic. I'm merely saying that the American people are concerned about all of these indictments and.
I think I should put your mind at ease, Jerry, and tell you that I frankly have not approached this matter with any quote unquote strategy. I'm responding to your question. I see great problems connected with you or anybody advancing to me or to any rational person the argument that because there is an 18-and-a-half-minute hiatus on the tape, and since there's a great deal of mystery surrounding how that occurred, that you can allege because that exists that therefore Richard Nixon is guilty of an accomplice status.
I mean, it really is senseless to argue whether Richard Nixon is guilty or not. I'm not indicating whether he's guilty or not. I'm saying these are questions that people are asking. And you're indicating that all of these things, everything that the people have asked about, that congressmen have asked about, are just silly and ridiculous. Like the president accepts the responsibility, but nothing other than I accept the responsibility and let's get on with it from there.
Well, I take the view that we're going to have to wait a while to find out what really happened as far as the 18-and-a-half minutes are concerned. And until we do get a satisfactory reading from scientists and from those who are familiar with tape machines, as apparently the original scientists are not, then we ought to suspend judgment.
Well, that is, again, another strategy on the part of the White House, and I see there's another strategy being employed today, and that is to attack the minority counsel on the House Judiciary Committee.
I have been making points about Mr. Jenner for Lo These Many Moons, and so has Bill Safire in the New York Times, who wrote a piece that just dismembered Mr. Jenner in terms of his political affiliations in the past, and in terms of whether or not he, like Congressman Brennan, has not already made up his mind.
No, it's the whole business of, I think, of the attitude that pervaded the White House in the last couple of years. That is, if you're not with me, you're against me. And if you're against me, we better get out to get you in some way, in some fashion, in some manner, either politically, attack you politically, issue statements to the effect that you are the one that's prejudiced and nobody else has committed any wrong acts. We are righteous and you are evil.
One of the other indications of the politicization of the impeachment issue, of course, is the immense lobbying effort that's being conducted in the Congress today. You know that the AFL-CIO has invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that 150 to 200 magazines have been fed into 12 million homes in this country, urging a flood of mail.
Why shouldn't they be permitted to do that?
You know that the Americans for Democratic Action, Congress Watch, Raiders Naders, or Naders Raiders, the American Civil Liberties Union,
side too, who are calling for fairness to the president,
who are flatly calling for the president's impeachment. Now, if this proceeding, the question we're faced with, Jared, seems to me, is whether or not this proceeding is going to be regarded as legal or whether it's going to be regarded as political. Are we going to judge on the innocence or guilt of Richard Nixon, or is this going to be a contest of political strength between two warring factions? Now, my contention is it should be focused very sharply on the innocence or guilt of Richard Nixon.
Well, I guess
But the problem is that if this is analogous to a grand jury proceeding, and indeed it is by law, supposedly that, then this type of pressuring, this type of lobbying effort is the equivalent of jury tampering. Therefore, we must conclude that it's a political exercise, it seems to me.
It is semi-political, of course it is. It has to be political in nature. It's a political exercise when they wrote it into the Constitution.
This is what Alexander Hamilton warned against. He said that if an impeachment proceeding were uncircumspectly moved towards, then instead of focusing on the true demonstrations of innocence or guilt, on the merits of the question, what you would have would be a partisan political contest of strength.
Well,
and that's what I think is developing.
Yeah, Mr. Madison also warned against exactly what happened in the White House in the last year and a half that caused all these resignations and all of these indictments of people around the president. And he warned of that, and that's why impeachment...
What was that?
The impeachment proceeding was written into the Constitution. That's why they thought about it.
What was that he warned against, Jerry?
About the gross exercise of power.
Well, Mr. Madison is the one, in fact, who excluded maladministration as an impeachable
I'm talking about
offense.
the gross, not maladministration, but the gross exercise of power. If one's underlings, if the second and third man in the administration were involved in criminal acts with the knowledge of the president, then obviously there are grounds there for impeachment. Obstruction of justice certainly is a grounds for impeachment. Now, it's 9 o'clock. We'll let you answer that. Right after news and weather, Dr. John McLaughlin is here, Deputy Special Assistant to the President. Now here's a ceiling to match your favorite decor. The ceiling masters at Armstrong have designed dramatic new chandelier ceilings that capture the robust flavor of Old Spain, the hand-carved beauty of colonial America, and the delicate formal brocade of provincial France. Line Lumber has all these beautiful Armstrong ceilings on display and can show you how easy it is for you to install one yourself over the weekend. And Armstrong's new grid installation method allows you to suspend it at any height you want. Visit Line Lumber in Danvers, Saugus, Stoughton, Medford, Norwood, and Framingham, and let them help put the finishing touch to your favorite room. Now, in just a couple of minutes, news and weather here on WBZ, and we'll return with an answer from Dr. McLaughlin. Your calls and comments will be welcomed, of course, at 254-5678.
Jamie Sullivan lives on a farm in Connecticut. Around here, where even a 9-year-old puts in a full day, Prince egg noodles have been a favorite for more than 50 years. They taste so good because they're made with just the golden yolks of eggs and a very special kind of flour. But most important, Prince egg noodles are extra nourishing because they're enriched with added vitamins. Today is Wednesday, and today Jamie Sullivan can't wait for dinner. Usually Wednesday is Prince Spaghetti Day. But Wednesday at the Sullivan place, for as long as anyone can remember, has been Prince Egg Noodle Day. But that's okay with Prince.
For a limited time only, Alitalia, and only Alitalia, is reducing prices on tours of Italy. Now through March 31st, we're cutting prices on most of our tours without cutting anything out of our tours. You can live a week in Rome, for instance, for just $397, including airfare. And while the cost is low, you'll be living very high. You'll stay at a first-class hotel with private bath and wake up to a continental breakfast each morning. You'll feast on magnificent Italian food and wine, and you'll explore your way through Rome's 2,000 years of art and history. Alitalia has 16 mini-tours that let you spend a week just about anywhere in Italy. And one more thing. While our tours cost less, your dollar buys at least 10% more, making a vacation in Italy just about the best value around. For a free brochure, call your travel agent or Alitalia. Rates from Boston are $373 to $462 per person, 7 or 8 day GIT economy class airfare, depending on accommodations and meal plans, subject to change.
Hi, this is Larry Glick, and I'll be seeing you in 3 hours on Radio 103.
Where entertainment is concerned, WBZ Boston, Group W, Westinghouse Broadcasting.
It's a very mild 58 degrees in Boston. Tonight's low will be in the 50s. I'm Ted Larson reporting the 9 o'clock WBZ News. And it's brought to you by Villas on the Green, the exclusive condominium community just north of Palm Beach. England has a new prime minister tonight. Labourite Harold Wilson today regained the post he left in 1970 when his party was defeated by the Conservatives. Over the weekend, former Prime Minister Edward Heath tried to form a coalition cabinet. However, he said today he could not and resigned. In elections last week, the Labour Party was voted a very narrow lead, but it wasn't large enough to have a clear majority. The political crisis in Israel continues tonight. However, one thing is certain. Golda Meir will continue as prime minister at least for the next 2 days. Yesterday, Mrs. Meir said she was resigning because of failure to form a minority cabinet. However, the news was met with displeasure from her own Labour Party, and leaders pressured her to reconsider her announcement. So Mrs. Meir today changed her mind and said she'd continue to work to form a new cabinet till the legal deadline for such a decision. That deadline is midnight Wednesday. United Press International tonight says Greek billionaire Aristotle Onassis may scrap plans to build his $600 million refinery in New Hampshire. The news service, as a spokesman for Olympic Refineries, thinks a site in Rhode Island might be a better choice. Konstantin Gratzos told UPI the Melville Tank Farm at the phased-out Newport Naval Base is an ideal location for the refinery. Gratzos said his company is tired of fighting the ecologists who want to ban the oil facility from the Granite State. Federal Judge Lee Gagliardi today said the trial of John Mitchell and Maurice Stans, accused of influence peddling, could continue. WBZ Stan Brooks files this courtroom report from New York.
Defense lawyers pictured John Mitchell and Maurice Stans as honorable men of conscience and integrity who were dragged into court because they had served a president who has since fallen into high disfavor. Mitchell's lawyer, Peter Fleming, told the jury he would prove that the former Attorney General did nothing, quote, to fix, to stop, or to influence a federal investigation in favor of Robert Vesco, the fugitive financier who made a secret $200,000 cash contribution to the Nixon campaign in 1972. Fleming referred to the trial as this agony and accused the prosecution of exerting pressure on witnesses called before the grand jury. In his opening statement for Maurice Stans, lawyer Walter Bonner said the former Commerce Secretary would take the stand in his own defense at this trial, even though he did not have to. Bonner said Stans had gone before the grand jury twice voluntarily, and in a dramatic statement made with a rare flourish, Bonner said Stans would, quote, rise again and speak again, talking to the jury. Bonner defended Stans' honor, said a Vesco aide never had the guts to ask Stans to get the Securities and Exchange Commission off Vesco's back, as Vesco allegedly had requested. He said he knew he was talking to a man of integrity and the message was never delivered. They knew, Bonner said, referring to Vesco and his aides, that they never had Maurice Stans in their pocket. 5 witnesses were called after the opening statements, but their testimony dealt with background material and with some matters that were not clearly spelled out. The trial of the 2 former cabinet officers resumes in the morning. Stan Brooks at the Mitchell-Stans trial in federal court, New York.
And the WBZ News time now 6 after 9.
Florida, warm and sunny all year round. Could Florida be in your future? Well, it can in one of the most beautiful and exclusive coastal areas, just 12 miles north of Palm Beach in the lovely town of Jupiter. It's called Villas on the Green. Only 3 minutes walk to the warm Atlantic Ocean. Villas on the Green. Beautiful condominiums in a small, exclusive community close to excellent golfing and fishing and boating. Villas on the Green are not the typical high-rise condominiums. They're only 2 stories, surrounded by sycamores and palm trees and gorgeous lawns and sun. With recreation facilities including clubhouse, tennis courts, putting green, heated pool, and much, much more. You can get a brochure about Villas on the Green and Florida living by sending a card to Villas on the Green, WBZ Radio, Boston, or call Mr. Ed Bennett at Edward Bennett Realty in Wollaston at 471-1014. That's 471-1014. Villas on the Green can put you in the Florida sun.
Federal Judge John Sirica today ordered a hearing for Wednesday on the controversial secret report handed him by the Watergate grand jury. The judge said he wants the session to determine the disposition of the report. The White House today said it would have no objections at the present if the report went to the House Judiciary Committee looking into the possible impeachment of the president. Many sources think the report contains the grand jury's feelings about the president's role in Watergate. And a freak accident in Chelsea this morning resulted in the death of 1 man and injuries to 2 others. Dominic Mattis was killed when the front of a cafe fell on him. The injured were identified as Walter McKay and John Murata. They were hurt when they were trapped underneath the rubble. Right now, here's the balmy weather forecast for Boston and vicinity. Tonight, cloudy and mild. Chance of a few showers. We'll have low temperatures in the 50s. Then on Tuesday, cloudy with scattered showers likely during the morning, becoming sunny by late in the day. Continued very warm. High temperatures in the mid to upper 60s once again. Tuesday night, fair. Low temperatures in the 40s. Then on Wednesday, mostly sunny and mild. High temperatures in the 50s. The WBZ temperature, it's now down to 58. Repeating this hour's top story, England has a prime minister tonight. Labourite Harold Wilson today regained the post he left in 1970 when his party was defeated by the Conservatives. And that is the 9 o'clock WBZ report with portions recorded. It's been brought to you by Villas on the Green. And for more information, write WBZ and write WBZ tomorrow. I'm Ted Larson, WBZ News, reminding you if you've got your BZ ALA printout, don't waste valuable time. Call and form your carpool right away. Once again on BZ Radio, we go back to Jerry Williams.
254-5678. Hello, America. This is Jerry Williams. Welcome back. In case you just tuned in, let me reintroduce Dr. John McLaughlin, Deputy Special Assistant to the President of the United States. He's a Jesuit priest. He's worked for the President over